All right. Welcome to Raising Funds for World Domination, Day 51. So, once again, there's no updates on the intro. Today I worked on some taxes and also finishing up the update from last night. So, today we'll continue on with development of the terminal block mining simulation game. So yesterday I worked on improving the inventory. So as you can see, you can select stuff now, but I guess I just noticed, so I made this thing I changed that to be a fancy Unicode character, and it looks like on this machine that's not installed or not recognized, so that's something to fix. Oh, I gotta move that so I can see. Galactic Past says, "Hello, Robert. How's it going?" All right. So item selection is working pretty good. I added some code to make it a bit more like properly padded and measure the width of the arrow character. Now, I think the goal that I will make today will be to try and make it so that your whatever you select here will be placeable up here. Going great. I implemented my support for cube maps in my engine. Excellent. So the next thing I'll probably work on tonight is I got to configure it so that the inventory actually sends a message to the client block model context thread, and that'll let it know what is actually selected. I'm gonna have to standardize my messages a bit better. They're kind of inconsistently named. Yoshikage says, "Hello, how's it going?" playing GTA 4. Missed the game. Horrible PC port though. I've always wanted to play any of them. I never played any of the Grand Theft Auto games. It has to be downgraded and patched using mods, otherwise it's unplayable. Huh. Like the official version. GTA 4 breaks if you try to run it at more than 60 FPS. Oddly enough, Rockstar keep repeating that mistake in pretty much every release. Yeah, that's rough. Is it like an official port, or I wonder if maybe they do that on purpose or something? just a lazy port because on console FPS it can't increase above 60 anyways. But is it like the officially released version, or is it like some the like problematic one? Is it like a bootlegged, like pirated version? That I'm not familiar with the game. I really enjoy busting in here with super chat now and then, but I can't. Not for a week. We'll do it for any of the regulars. I'm just curious as an experiment, like if the regulars don't super chat for like a week, will YouTube just like find random people to super chat, or will it like one of my old videos go viral or something? As I did notice that when revenue trended lower a bit, I had some other videos that I posted like over a year ago started getting more views. I'm talking about official releases. Okay. Wow. Wow, that's quite funny. Okay, that compiled. How can you lock in a frame rate when every machine will have slightly different speed characteristics? It must have been originally created for console, probably, where it was like a consistent frame rate. There's some very funny optimizations in the game. For example, you can park a vehicle in front of police stations. A police will spawn with that car instead of a police car. That's funny. So I guess it just probably like clones whatever type of car is in that certain area. Anyone here games on Linux? Heroic Launcher or Flatpak has issues. Nope, no gaming experience with Linux from me. What was the game where the subway train was just a hat with a guy running really fast underneath? All right, no crashes. All right, that might actually implement the feature. Nice. Is now implemented. It's the first new feature in this game in a long time. On a mode of bauxite. Now let's see if mining picks are mineable. Oh, they are. Neat. Oh, this will also mean that I can actually make it so you can select you can actually use the effects of a given selected pickaxe instead of just because right now my code just it like inspects your inventory. But now you can like choose to consume a pickaxe or not. All right, commit that. Here's Sito. I'm not sure what that says, but this is an English-only live stream. You'll have to type in English, otherwise I can't figure out what you're saying. The TU, that probably means you. Hello, I congratulate you on your work. Oh, thank you. Robert, how would you implement a UI system? Depends on what kind of UI in what context. I mean, in the terminal game, I have a UI, and that has required significant thought process to work within the constraints of the terminal. Something like IMG UI. I'm not familiar with what that is, because it really depends on like the answer really depends on what system you're hooking into, or what API is available to present the UI. So in the terminal, the UI stuff is very limited. It consists of the columns and stuff. You can't necessarily draw pixels in the terminal unless you have a terminal that supports sixels. If you're making a desktop application, then you have access to as a Java desktop app, you can use like Swing UI to make user interface elements and stuff. If it's a web application, then there's the whole suite of web tools for doing that. So it depends like what language you're coding in, and and then of course if you're doing like a game that uses like advanced 3D graphics and stuff like that, now you're writing within like a device context, and you have to like learn that like OpenGL, and I guess DirectX was the one back in the day. I don't know what do people still use DirectX? It's for my engine. I think you said C++. I guess it depends on. I would say you probably want to. I think you posted some videos. I think you posted a video in the Discord, and so it looked to me like you had a bit of a UI. Are you using like a what kind of interface are you talking to? Is it like I haven't done 3D graphics programming in years, but is it like DirectX or OpenGL or something? Or there was a competitor to OpenGL, I think. Whatever context it is, within that context is that's the constraints you're working within. So if you're working in C or C++, really there's kind of no limit. A C or C++ API can talk to basically anything with enough code. However, it makes sense to like think hard about what kind of UI, what kind of pre-existing interfaces do you want to use? Because like you could if you want, you can write like DirectX or OpenGL or something like that from scratch in C and C++ yourself. But you probably don't want to do that. You probably just want to use existing stuff. Okay, that should. I should only use the pickaxe if I have it selected. Yeah, in the thing you posted, there was some. it looked like you were already using some kind of like, okay, there we go, Vulkan, and I already have all the groundwork set up. Now I just want to know how to implement a button. Like, how would my app know that the user clicked on the button? All that stuff. I've never used Vulkan. I don't know what comes with that. Like, I know for DirectX, if I remember correctly, DirectX, it did some of the, it had primitives for like actually drawing stuff. And I think also there was some like sound things, but also like events for clicks. So I would say I'd probably just Google that, like how to detect a mouse click in Vulkan. And I don't know what if anyone here knows more than me. Feel free to chime in. But if Vulkan has like some API primitives for setting up a button, ideally you'd want to use that. And if that doesn't exist, then you could like write your own button code from scratch. Just letting you know primitives for Vulkan. I have to do all that manually. Yeah, it may be almost like talking to the GPU driver. Vulkan is not fun to work with at all. Yeah, I have no experience with it at all. In fact, my expertise and knowledge is mainly centered around like the compiler, the operating system, but the actual like 3D graphics programming is the one thing that I just never, in my undergrad, I didn't focus on it at all because I was focusing on other courses. So I'm not the right person to talk to, but I like the really polished graphics programming. But also used to interface with the CUDA cores. Also used for the, okay. So it sounds like it's a, it is a fairly narrow subset of stuff that it does. And this is one of those cases where I'd probably just ask ChatGPT, or even like, and use Google's whatever Google has that large language model thing that suggestion. I would just Google search for like how to detect a mouse click in Vulkan, and then you'll probably get something in the in the like auto response that'll say like, actually you can't do this. You'll have to use another thing. It'll be like the kind of canned AI response, but it'll probably be helpful because I don't know. There's probably some, like presumably I guess other people use Vulkan for graphics programming, and if they do, I would assume some of those people also have the exact same problem that they need to detect a mouse click. So there's probably some standard I don't know, like existing package or event library that goes along with it. Because if you're doing, if the buttons are going to be like I'm thinking like in a game, say like the last real kind of fancy, or like say like a game like Minecraft. If there's just a button on the screen, you click it and it's within the context of the rendered game area. So that kind of button, I probably have to query mouse position from the OS API and then stack the buttons. Certainly you could do it that way. I would have to assume like in this day and age, that would be a solved problem. Like buttons and stuff like that have been implemented and re-implemented a million times. There's all kinds of like event propagation stuff and like the animation of the button going down and stuff. You could code all that from scratch, maybe if you want to like learn. If you want to do it just to learn, I would say if you if you want to make progress on your game, it probably makes sense to see if there's like an existing there has to be some. I mean, I would just try that right now for you. Just Google search for like how to detect how to implement a button with Vulkan or something, or like a button library for Vulkan or something, and then see if there's something interesting that comes up. All right, I can finally sparingly use my stone pickaxes. When to implement my own text rendering. Oh, that's text rendering can get surprisingly complicated. Yeah, I would say ChatGPT. That's one of those areas where ChatGPT is good. I'm sure there is a specific like recommendation that's probably paired with it. So that would be within the context of like the like fancy. Within like the context of it, like 3D graphics accelerated stuff, but also you could also Google search for like C++ GTK button. Hello, chicken in before going to bed. Hope everyone is having a great night. Yeah, I made some decent progress on the game. I have the ability to select items now, so I can finally change. I can select that piece of copper and I can place it down now. But yeah, like if you want buttons that are more like standard like desktop application buttons, like if I like for example, this button here, and all these UI elements, these here are almost certainly GTK. So if you search for like GTK and like GTK plus, I think, and there's C and C++ libraries for working with those. That they're also kind of like writing code for this stuff. Like UI elements in C and C++, this can be pretty painful. And it's also fraught with errors. There's a ton of stuff set up and initialized. And there's also, I think, I haven't used it, but you can also Google search for Qt. I think Qt5 was the latest one. And I can't remember if that's a replacement for GTK, but I know it's like a pretty standard thing for writing like user interface elements. I think I'm going to pay for more dehumanization in the basement than air conditioning upstairs this summer. Oh, dehumidification. I wrote that dehumanization. All right. Yeah, dehumidifiers actually use quite a bit of energy. Qt is independent of GTK. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I haven't used them. I used GTK for an undergrad course, and then I think I can't remember if I actually programmed something that ran Qt. I think I did like a Hello World application with Qt, and then forgot it and never used it again. But anyway, those are the kinds of things you could look into. So like, yeah, if you want like desktop application user interfaces, GTK and Qt are the things you want to look up. If you want to do stuff within like a graphics accelerated device context, then you'd have to look at first, like, see what kind of button library for Qt. That would be like a completely different set of API calls and stuff. I think when I researched a few years ago, Qt seemed like the painful but portable-ish library. Yeah, I think a lot of these GTK, I remember people like saying negative things about it, and I don't know, it's deprecated or something, or it's no longer recommended. Maybe, I don't know. I don't write many desktop applications, so I don't know. People overall prefer Qt. Is Qt newer? Or was it like one of the things that's intended to replace GTK? GTK has too much GNOME shenanigans. Yeah, these are all news to me. I've only used it superficially. They're both maintained. Okay. That's good. There's some diversity in those things. So if one of the maintainers or something quits, then there's another open source one. What project will you work on after this? I'm going to try to get to the next milestone. So actually, you know what? This work tonight. I think I've basically done what I need on this help menu. The next thing I want to implement is improvements to the map area. So I want to add the ability to display a bit of depth information. I want to try and there's actually a whole bunch of refactoring I'm going to have to do before I really get to that. But I wanted to be able to display a different color if there's a block under you. And it's going to require some updating to actually load that into the memory and maintain it. And because there's a whole bunch of fancy stuff to avoid it lagging. So like when I move down, or like when I move sideways like this, it has to shift the cells, and then also it has to be smart. So it's only updating. So it calculates. It doesn't like redraw the whole screen. It just calculates that okay, these cells here are like these cells are rocks, but then they're going to change to empty space. And the same thing over here. So it's only printing the boundary. And that code made it faster, but it also made it more complicated. And then once I finish that and get it released, then the plan is to work on some more long form videos. Well, that selection feature works. I just need to fix my arrow. I have to look into why that it's not rendering. I thought that was a portable Unicode character, but I guess not. Let me think. I didn't think I'd get as far tonight. I guess one thing I was going to start doing was I need to refactor this monstrosity of code. So this was kind of just a stopgap that I did a long time ago. And I just did it quickly to like make it work, and then I never got time to come back and simplify it and improve it. Or actually, that code's probably not too bad. The real offender was this code. This is also a nice source of bugs. I had a bug where like some of the cells weren't updating, and I think it was because like I think I missed this. I like add a cell to it, or add a flag. Now I think one of the improvements I can make is to get rid of this pending load flag. write one from scratch. Yeah, it's always more satisfying to write something from scratch. But having said that, there's having written a number of things from scratch. It's also worth questioning why. Sometimes, especially when you're younger, it helps just to get confidence and stuff. But then, when you get to my age, you have to question a bit more, like why am I working on this? Sometimes it makes sense to just use a library if it exists. But then again, a lot of existing solutions are garbage. So sometimes it really does make sense to write your own. Let's try this. This might totally break, but we'll see what happens. Just popping in to say hi. Gonna go back to my cave. Wishing all a great evening. And juicy steak. Excellent. Thank you for the kind words. Alright, that did not totally crash. That is actually great. This might even be faster. So if this works, then I might be able to completely get rid of all that block change flag garbage. Oh, my monitor's messing up. That's annoying. Lately, the cable has started like, I don't know, the connection's bad or something, so the monitor starts shutting off randomly. Moriarty says, hi, how's it going? Now, does that break everything? Excellent. That did not break everything. In fact, it's nice and fast. Excellent. Still no issues. This is some of the most satisfying software development, when you've improved something else and you can like just kind of incrementally delete a whole bunch of old code. Excellent. I'm on a roll. Oh, there are question marks. Excellent. That means it worked. And it seems like it's actually faster. So I think what I'll do for this is a lot of this code I'll replace with a circular buffer. My monitor's turning off again. Thank you for the motivation. I've been struggling to enjoy programming at work because of all the things that get in the way. Been programming a toy Conway implementation while you've been working. Excellent. Conway's Game of Life. Actually, one of my things, of course, the multiplayer thing, that'll be one of the next things to work on. To work on the actual having server processes and things like enemies and stuff. And one of the first things I'm probably going to implement is like a toy testing is a Game of Life block, and then I'll have to think about. I have like a million ideas for things that would be cool, but something I think would be interesting is that the way I actually think, if I get around to actually implementing this, the way I'm going to implement server changes. So the game, it's an infinite like matrix of blocks. They're just in a simple database. The way I'm going to implement server processes is server processes will actually just be like special clients. So to to actually process the world, you can have like just another client will connect to it with like slightly more privileged access, and then just query whatever blocks are at a given location, and then just perform the operations to update those blocks. And then it can just like, so you could have like a region of the world that's just like endlessly playing Conway's Game of Life forward for like a selected region. And the way it would basically listen to updates is, so it's a shared region where the client could just like place a block, and then it subscribes. So it's subscribed to the updates. So as soon as you place the block, it gets an update that a block was at that location, and then it just updates the Conway's Game of Life rule, and then it can write back into the same shared world for like some subset of the map. Or I guess you could make it do that over the entire area, but it would be really slow. Apparently to speed up Conway's Game of Life, they use like hashes and stuff, pre-computed hashes. I'd love to see the chaos that ensures if that's unbounded, a new chance on a generator pattern. Yeah, it'd be interesting to do some like stress tests where it just like randomly writes into the world. Like that would probably make for a good stress test to make sure that like the consistency is correct, and to have like tons and tons of updates of everything reading and writing. This is closer to home. Programming at work be soul sucking because of how messy everything gets. Don't even get me started on MATLAB. Back when I was in industry, there wasn't even like a lot of programming. There was lots of meetings about stuff, and people being stressed out about production being broken, and trying to like corner the project manager to figure out what they actually want you to build, and then they would tell you, and then come back later and be like, actually, you would do it totally different way. All right, that simplification, that went by. That was much easier than I thought it was going to be. I basically just deleted my kind of fancy difference checking code. That code was a huge source of bugs, but now it's basically obsolete because I have all the difference calculations in the other threads. Automotive work, a little hardware work, the QNX. Automotive and aerospace both, like MATLAB. You can generate MISRA compliant C and C++. Oh, okay. Interesting. QNX. Did I mention I mentioned this at least once on stream, but I don't know if you guys were present. I did the QNX operating system. I think it was Dan Dodge, and some people started QNX, and that the QNX operating system came from the first offering of a course, CS 452, I think, at University of Waterloo. And I did the, I took CS 452 back in 2013. I asked my professor if he taught them back in the day, but I guess it was like the 1980s or something. It was the very first offering of the course, apparently. That it was done by, it was taught by like a couple grad students. QNX major downside: it's not open source. At least the latest version is free. Yeah, QNX is if I remember correctly, I think QNX is used in like nuclear submarines and stuff, and a bunch of super duper fancy safety critical stuff. It's interesting about QNX lore. Yeah, that was my my understanding, unless there's some bad communication. But my prof for that course was it was one of my favorite courses, because the course was like completely unlike any course. I think the first intro, the first things that the prof said, he was this older guy. He was kind of eccentric. He taught two of the hardest courses in CS software engineering, and he was also randomly he had some position in the arts faculty for some reason. And his intro to the course was like, you're all here today because you're a little bit weird, and I'm a little bit weird too. And they just went on to talk about how much work the course was. And after the first class, half of the course dropped the course, because once they knew like how much work it was going to be. And the lectures had like almost nothing to do. Like a lot of people just never went to lectures. Like the whole course was basically building the operating system for that course. And sometimes people would go to class, and I asked a question about like how to send the clear to send bid or something like that. And the prof went on this like 45-minute tangent about the early beginnings of the internet in Canada. I guess apparently one of the first internet nodes we had was at the Toronto Zoo, and he talked about like the early days of the internet back then. And at the end of it, he was just like, "Oh, I guess, but I'm just wasting your time because this has nothing to do with the question." It was kind of amusing. But then every once in a while he'd snap back into brilliance, and from memory he'd just like draw diagrams of like the bootloader locations and all the addresses and stuff. And Unix free RTOS, both used in a lot of safety critical systems. Zephyr is also another interesting RTOS. Interesting. Unix is microkernel, so it's better suited for certain tasks than Linux. Yeah, I guess doing that course, we wrote a microkernel in the course, and I wrote my own like after that course. So we did it with a partner, but after that course, I wrote my own like fully from scratch microkernel. just as a side project, and I used it on a couple embedded devices that I used. And you can see the influence of the learning microkernel stuff if you look at the code for this game, because I basically structured it so like every single thread, in order to like avoid a lot of the concurrency issues, every thread just sends messages to each other, and then they all have a work queue that they operate on, so they don't have to like worry about concurrency issues. So while that Linus got in a fight with the Minix guy, and I'm gonna let the kernel still dominate, I want to write a microkernel from scratch. Maybe I should do it in SIG. The actual like C code is honestly pretty easy. Like it depends what you want to call a microkernel. Because like the kind of five basic things you need to have some kernel calls for like memory allocation, or like sending messages, starting processes, and maybe a couple other things. That's pretty easy. But then the thing that's like custom, you have to write the context switch. The context switch is going to be custom for the given architecture, and then also you have to make sure that whatever the context switch code, which is going to be an assembly, you can't. If you try to fight the compiler, like if you know how the compiler lays out the bytecode, and sets up pops the stack and everything, then it'll be very easy. But if you try like fighting it, then it's one of those things where it's, if you don't save one of the registers or something and you implement like preemptive context switching, then it's one of the hardest things in the world to debug. Kernel, not corn. I forget because I live around a lot of corn. podcast crypto T01 says ahola. For desktop, monolithic kernels are fine. A system crash is just inconvenience. System crash in your missile OS due to bad driver would be bad news. Yeah, I think for like if the general debate on like which is better, monolithic kernel or microkernel. There's a lot of these like better than things where people have these passionate arguments, but in a lot of cases there's just like there's a very precise, like it's like a mathematically complementary relationship between these two. A microkernel will always necessarily be like a little bit. It will consume a few more resources, and it'll require like the amount of if you have in a microkernel, if you have to do something and send a message to something else, that is necessarily going to take more resources in order to do that. So it's not necessarily inherently better or worse. But the advantage of microkernels, it's just more compartmentalized and it can be more safe and stuff like that. So it's about optimizing what you're trying to accomplish. And just like you said, if it's safety critical, it has to work. Whereas for a microkernel, for a monolithic, it's obvious why that won, and it's just because like for convenience sake, everything's just going to kind of move toward the just reaching directly into memory. Like you could do it the proper way and like have like a lot, really good concurrency and messaging and stuff like that, but it's easier if you can just like bypass everything. It's like it's the equivalent of just saying like, you know what, let's just do this fast and just like access everything from global variables. If everything is a global variable, it's just way faster to access and implement it and stuff. Depending on which driver is a bug, someone is already facing bad news. I always thought the contention for resources would be a huge headache. Given the state of Linux and proprietary drivers, quality, what could go wrong? I think the right approach is like to write something in a like microkernel following a microkernel paradigm, and then as soon as it becomes obvious that like sending stuff through message passing and having like strong isolation, as soon as that's like inappropriate, then just like break that, just violate that rule. Because there's some things that don't necessarily need to be super safety critical, and the microkernel approach just makes it everything way more compartmentalized. Always hard to measure trade-off. Yeah, every time I go to Subway, I always think, how would you implement a Subway worker who's making sandwiches? Would you implement them using a microkernel approach? And would you allow them preemptive interrupts? Sometimes I go there and they'll be like, "Hi, what can I get for your order?" And then I'll answer them, but in that, just as I answer them, they get distracted and they'll talk to someone else for a second, or like the thing will go off and they'll toaster, and then they'll go to get a sub, and then they come back to me, and then they'll be like, "What can I get you for your order?" But since I already sent the message, and I didn't get an acknowledgement packet, I just stand there and stare at them forever, and that causes a deadlock, and then the whole Subway goes out of business. cool channel called Core Dump that goes over low-level OS concepts. I highly suggest watching. Yeah, I'll check it out if I remember. Let's go back to writing applications on bare metal. Those were the good old days. Raspberry Pi is in bare metal though. I haven't tried yet, but the Raspberry Pi Pico, that's kind of like a bit closer to bare metal, isn't it? To me, it seemed like the kind of seemed like the Arduino equivalent for the Raspberry Pi universe. Alright, this function, I think I can get rid of this. I have been meaning to buy a Raspberry Pi Pico, but haven't had time. So much cool tech I'd like to play with, but interesting. That's not correct. Have you tried color theme Coriller? I have not. ESP32 is cheapest way to go bare metal. Plus, you get Wi-Fi. Yeah, I started playing around with the ESP family of stuff, but More recently, though, I've been that was kind of like I think 2015 or so. It seemed pretty interesting, but you have to run a lot of like sketchy Chinese software, and I decided that maybe it's probably not a good idea to run to like build into that ecosystem. The Arduino ID is a crutch I've been able to rid myself of. Actually, I have a YouTube video on how to how to compile and how to do a project purely in like just with like a make file, and just compile it on the command line and flash it for Arduino. Yeah, I think it would be really cool to do. I had some ideas for some interesting projects with like, some of the wireless, like mesh networking and stuff with those devices, but never got the time to develop those. I think I got censored when commenting about proper way to use ESP32 with that sketchy stuff. You should clip the subway joke for a short or something. Yeah, that probably would make for a good bit. If I get around to it, I actually thought like to recycle content. It could also make sense. Like if I could use AI to go back and like scrub through all these live streams and just like it would probably make sense. I could probably just take AI and just use like pull out all the AI transcripts and then just ask like ChatGPT to say like, give a suggestion for, something, find some good clips, and then just automatically clip it. Don't need anything more than Arduino IDE and a platform. Platform IO is open source. I can download PSP. There is some kind of like there's a binary blob though on the ESPs. I mean, there could be, the fact that they're so cheap makes me think it is plausible that there's, some back doors in there or something. maybe not back doors, but like it seems like the strategy now is you don't put back doors, you just fill the software with 10,000 buffer overflow bugs. I think that is Windows thing, since you have to download serial drivers. It's not just on like on the development machine, but also like you need the expressive bootloader, or like the bootstrapping. Like there's some whatever code handles the Wi-Fi and stuff, like the stuff that's baked into the chip. I think it's the stuff that's like some of it might even be like pre-flashed. But I think you can like update it and change it. But even like the whatever, like there has to be some basic stuff on the chip for it to like someone had to write the code that talks the Wi-Fi protocol and stuff. So all of that code, in my view, is probably a bit sketchy. I think ESP isn't manufactured by just one company. Oh, isn't? Well, that's probably the. Like, there's the chips, which I assume are probably all from one company, that Expressive or whatever. But the like the Arduino, what is it, AT Mega or whatever, that chip. I think that chip is fairly simple, but the ESP chip is fairly complicated. Adafruit ESP, I assume it's still the Expressive chip itself. Like there's like Raspberry Pi is their own company, but then the actual chip, the secret sauce, is Broadcom. And I'm not aware of if you'd have to need like a totally separate foundry and stuff to make your own chips. Because if you go looking for them to buy them, you can also just buy the expressive chips yourself, and then put your own like resistor and your own circuit board. One of the Unix or C authors talked about how we can't trust anything because basically nobody can know the source of the compiler that compiled the compiler. You know, I remember I had a professor. There's that famous article that you're referencing. Yeah, Reflections on Trust and Trust. I remember being presented with that when I was an undergraduate in like our course on compilers, and I was like, that's it's like a general privacy thing, and I didn't get it, and it was not until I started actually writing a compiler that I started thinking like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually like an interesting special case, because then you could code in a special case, like some activation token or something, to make the compiler behave in a different way when it's compiling itself, or when it's compiling any specific program, to like behave differently and hide stuff. Well, I might actually call it a night. I made that was some good progress. I can see how I can probably collapse this even further and simplify it. And then once all this kind of like I could probably get rid of this whole function here. Once that's simplified down, and this here, I will probably replace this with a simple circular buffer, which will be less code and faster. And then once I have all that done, then I can work on displaying the third dimension layer. Zero revenue means more progress. There's been a few days with zero revenue. We'll see what happens if I've encouraged the regulars to not super chat for a while. So we'll see as an experiment if the YouTube algorithm what it does to my metrics. But anyway, I think I'll leave it there for tonight, and we'll pick this up again tomorrow. So see you guys later.